In this lesson, we're going to look at how to import our texture maps into Maya and begin connecting them to an Arnold material. Now, normally, when we're creating a new material, you might select an object and then right click and then choose assign new material, and then create an AI standard surface from the Arnold shader list. Now, in this case, however, the objects already have materials assigned to them. And these materials were used to create the texture sets inside of Substance Painter. That's where all these names come from. So for this example, we already have materials such as bread and tableware transparent and tableware itself. So because these materials are already assigned correctly, we do not need to create new materials from scratch. Instead, we can keep the existing assignments and we can simply just convert the materials to Arnold materials. So to do this, select an object. I'm going to start with this one over here, and we can see that its current material assignment is called tableware. Now let's look over here in the attribute editor, and under the material type, you'll see that the current material may be set to something like Phong in this case. Now Phong, Blinn, and Lambert are all default Maya materials, and since we are rendering with Arnold, we want to use an Arnold specific material instead. So click the material type drop down and change it to an AI standard surface. You should find it close here to the top, right over here. Now the material remains assigned to the same objects, but it's now an Arnold material. And from here we can rename it clearly. So I want to keep the naming logical and consistent with what we have in the Substance Painter file. So I'm going to call it tableware underscore matte in capital letters. And now we can begin setting up the textures. So rather than connecting texture maps through the checkerboard icons that we see here in the attribute editor, and this is what's often actually taught at a beginner level, instead, I rather want us to use the hypershade straight off the bat, because this is going to give us clearer visual layouts and it makes it easier to control our connections. So let's go ahead and open up the hypershade. Now I'm going to jump into this first graph over here, and I think I want to start off by renaming it. I don't want an untitled one. I want this to be dedicated to this tableware matte material. So I'm going to double click on this and I'm going to call it tableware. Right, now let's make sure that we actually have the correct material graphed. So I want to start off by clearing this altogether. So we can do that by clicking on this icon over here with the star, with the 3 stars in the box. And then let's go ahead and make sure that we are selecting that tableware matte over here in the browser. And then we're going to click on the input and output connections to graph that material. Now we can see that this is called tableware matte. We can see the shading group is still holding on to the older name. It's not that important that the shading group itself has the same name as this, but for neatness purposes and all of that, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to relabel it anyway. So I'm going to call it tableware underscore shading group. All right, so to bring in a texture map, you can either press the tab key and type in file and then go ahead and select file texture. Or what you can do is you can open up your Windows Explorer and you can navigate to wherever the texture maps are. And then you can simply just click and drag and drop them into the browser window. Now, please note that if you are using a UDIM workflow, you only need to bring in the first tile in the sequence, or in fact, any tile in the sequence, because Maya can then recognize the rest of the sequence once we set it up correctly. But before we get to that, let's first import each of the channel maps into the graph. So I already have the base color. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to drag in my height map over here, and it's going to look a little bit messy at first, and that's fine. We'll organize it after the fact. Here's the metalness, here's the normal, and then finally we're going to have roughness. I'm just going to drop that over there, and let's just move that to the side. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this one over here, because this is the one that we created using tab and typing in file texture, and we can see that it's currently not carrying a map. So let's go ahead and let's get rid of that. We do not want excess clutter. Okay, so now let's start here with the color channel, just because that makes the most logical sense, and the color map is generally the first map that you plug in terms of this list over here. So if we select this map, we want to tell Maya that this map is actually part of a UDIM sequence. And the way that we do that is that if we look here in the property editor, just under the image name, we'll see that there's a UV tiling mode, and by default it's set to off. If you click on that, you'll see that there's an option here called UDIM. We can go ahead and just select that. Now what we need to do is we need to go through each one of these maps, and we need to set it up according to a UDIM workflow. And you'll notice that Maya actually does confirm the fact that it is picking up that UDIM string by telling you how many tiles that it has found. And it's quite important to note that while Maya is telling you that it's only found one tile, the fact is that even if there is only one map, you still want to set it to UDIM, because that strictly just is the most correct approach to have when you are writing out texture maps with the UDIM string at the end. So let's go ahead and let's set this on the metalness as well. And I'm going to do the same thing on the height, and then the same thing for the normal. Now, once the maps are imported and are all set to UDIM, and you've made sure of that as well, we can then begin connecting them. So the base color map, this is generally the easiest one to connect, simply because of the fact that we can just click this out color over here, click and drag, and we can just drop it over base color like so. And it's as simple as that. The map is now connected. Now, if you want to keep things a little bit neater, and I always like to keep this neat because graphing of materials in your material networks can grow to become quite complicated. I like to always just make sure that these connections are nice and straight. And on top of that, if you click on these pizza boxes over here, you'll see that you can actually collapse the nodes themselves. And this can help to just make things look a little bit more organized. Now, you do not lose access to vital information. If you select the node, you're still able to change all of its properties. The only thing that you are obscuring are these output connections, but you can just simply click on the pizza box just to expose them again, and then just recollapse the node once you're done. Okay, so let's move on to metalness. Now, the way that you want to connect metalness is that you can't simply click on the out color and drag it over metal or metalness, because you'll notice that Maya doesn't accept that, and for good reason. Because metalness is a channel that is expecting just a single channel's worth of information, not three, right? And when we have out color, we can see that if we click on this plus icon, the out color is composed of three channels, red, green, and blue, which means that it is a multi-channel output. But metalness has this green color node, and that green indicates that it's just a single channel that it's looking for. So we click on the plus icon and we grab the red channel over here, and we drag and we drop it over metalness, and there the connection has been successfully made. Once again, we can neaten this up, and then we can move on. So let's go to the roughness over here. Roughness is going to be the exact same thing. We want to open up the out color. We want to grab the red channel, and we want to connect it to specular roughness. All right. And then we're going to move on to the next one I think we should do is normal. Now, the thing with normal is that we can't actually connect the normal map straight to the normal camera. We can try and do it, and Maya actually does accept the connection, but it's not going to give very good results. Instead, a normal map needs to go through, think of it like its own translator. So we hit the tab key and we type in normal, and you'll see that there's something called an AI normal map. And when we click on this, we get this purple node. Now this purple node, as I mentioned moments ago, it's like a translator. What I want you to do is I want you to plug in the normal map. And then what this node does is it helps to interpret the data and apply relevant attributes to that information so that it can then pass off the most accurate version of it to the surface model itself. Now we are left with a very interesting situation in that we also have a height map. Now the thing is that normal and height actually carries the same information. So we don't want to be using both of them at the same time. And in many ways we can't, because a height map also plugs into a normal camera. So if you have the choice between the two, you always want to go with a normal map. A normal map has a more sophisticated way of storing the surface detail compared to a height map. It's always useful just to bring this in, just in case. But actually connecting the map is not something that we need to prioritize over a normal map itself. So at this stage, we've converted an existing Maya material into an Arnold material. We've imported our texture maps, we've set them to UDIM, and we've also connected them to the main channels. And in the next video, we're going to look more closely at things like color space and why different texture maps need different color space settings.